And with which revisor would like to take a stab at explaining this? Charles? Okay. Charles with an explainer on what the bill does.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2768 requires landlords to accept multiple partial payments of rent from tenants if the total amount of rent is paid in full and on time. When a landlord requires a demonstration of income for qualification for housing, the bill also requires landlords to consider all income from a broad range of income sources. Section 1 pertains to rent payments and remedies. As I indicated, tenants may make multiple payments to the landlord or designee if total rent is paid on time and in full. If the landlord or designee refuses a rental payment, that payment is forfeited to the landlord and the tenant's obligation for that amount is discharged. This section does not limit a landlord's other rights under the Act. Noncompliance creates liability in favor of the tenant against the landlord for actual damages, punitive damages, and in a successful enforcement action, also costs and reasonable attorney's fees. Requirements and remedies are in addition to other legal requirements and remedies. The second section of the bill pertains to consideration of income by a landlord when a landlord requires a showing of income to qualify for housing. So for that purpose, there's a definition of an income in the bill, and that is any lawful source of money paid directly or indirectly to a renter or buyer. So specifically, income includes, but is not limited to, wages, compensation from any lawful profession or occupation, government or private income, government or private assistance, grants, loan programs, compensation under some federal regulations that are mentioned there, and those pertain to federal veterans, pensions, disability compensation, and survivors' dependency and indemnity compensation. Pension, annuity, alimony, child support, and also proceeds from sale or pledge of property or interest in property. So a broad range of income that is mentioned, but again, the wording is it includes but not limited to. There's a specific exception. Income does not include federal housing assistance issued under Section 8 of the Housing Act of 1937. If a tenant's application is rejected due to failure to consider all income, the landlord must repay double the tenant's or prospective tenant's application fees and costs. This act is supplemental to the Landlord and Tenant Act. If enacted, the act would take effect January 1st, 2027. So not July 1, January 1, 2027. Chairman.
Thank you, Charles. Any questions for the revisor? Charles, the multiple payments, they have to be made on the same day, right? They're not over time?
So the way the bill is worded, I think a reasonable interpretation would be that they could be made over time as long, and the wording here is right from the bill, as long as rent is paid on time and in full. So the reference is to multiple payments as long as rent is paid on time and in full. So that would suggest that they could be made over time, or at least would allow for that. Okay.
Thanks for the clarification. And then there's a cause of action in here that I wasn't aware of at first, but so how does that work? The landlord can be sued for not accepting?
Yes, Chairman. And this is in Section 1 of the bill, first page. If you look at lines 15 to 17, a failure to comply with respect to any tenant, a person who fails to comply is liable to the tenant in an amount equal to the sum of, and then there's a list there, actual damages, punitive damages if allowed by the court, and also attorney fees costs if the action is successful.
Okay, any questions, committee? All right, seeing none. All right, so there are 10 proponents that are here today, and I think 1 or 2 opponents. And looking through the testimony, it seems like most of the proponents are going to say the same thing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow Representative Howell to introduce herself and go through her testimony. And then we'll call on the rest of the people that are in person. And I would like you to limit your testimony to 3 minutes each and just hit the high points of what wasn't discussed prior to you. And then when we get to WebEx, we'll do the same. And if anyone has anything to add that hasn't already been discussed, so that we can get through this in a reasonable amount of time without a lot of repetitiveness. So with that, I'll call up, I'll open the proponent testimony, and I'll call up Leah Howell, Representative Leah Howell. Howell. Welcome to Commerce.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Representative Leah Howell, and Chair Todwater, Vice Chair Ward, and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to present proponent testimony on House Bill 2768 today. I present this legislation grounded on the principles of individual liberty, contractual fairness, and equal treatment under the law. House Bill 2768 modernizes the Kansas Residential Landlord and Tenant Act to reflect current economic realities and practices while preserving legitimate landlord protections. This bill contains 2 primary components: a reasonable accommodation for multiple on-time payments. House Bill 2768 requires landlords to accept multiple payments towards rent so long as the full rent is paid on time. It does not limit, I think it is important to note that it does not limit other lawful landlord rights. If you notice in section 1A1 on lines 13 and 14, it says nothing in this section shall limit a landlord's other rights under this act. So it does not affect the landlord's ability to evict if the tenant fails to meet their obligations, their contractual obligations to pay the rent on time. Rent must still be paid in full on time, as I've already mentioned. What the bill does provide is flexibility in how that obligation is satisfied. For example, allowing for Kansas renters to set up digital automatic payments from their weekly or bi-weekly paychecks is a reasonable accommodation. It is not an undue hardship for our landlords. Providing flexibility in payment timing so long as rent is timely and complete reflects contemporary financial practices and promotes housing stability without shifting risks for landlords. The second part of this bill requires consideration of all lawful income. I'd like to point out that this is not mandated acceptance on the part of the landlords. When landlords require tenants or prospective tenants to meet income thresholds, House Bill 2768 requires that all lawful income be considered. Increasingly, rental applications are processed through automated digital screening systems with preset income filters that may automatically reject non-traditional or W-2 income sources, including veterans' disability compensation or retirement income, for example. As I have talked to both tenants across the state and also landlords across the state, this is an ongoing issue. Some landlords are really good about setting up their systems so that it does not pre-screen out their tenants, but many are not. And so this continues to be a barrier in many ways. I I have talked to a lot of mom and pop landlords, and we've visited with them, and many of them, of course, do not like the idea of having this change, but there are also many of them that feel like this is actually not a burdensome change, and that this is something that can be managed, and in fact, many of them are already doing it already. So with that, I feel that House Bill 2768 promotes flexibility and accountability and fairness. It strengthens contractual integrity by ensuring rent is paid in full and on time. It protects veterans and retired Kansans from unintended digital exclusion, and it aligns landlord-tenant practices with modern financial realities and practices. And I am available to answer questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, committee, any questions for Representative Howell? I have one. You said all lawful income, and you include in their child support. So would they have to prove that they are receiving the child support, or just that they are due the child support?
There is nothing in the law that would prevent landlords from, of course, just like a paycheck, landlords are allowed to, ask for proof of paycheck for, X number of months or whatever the landlord would like to specify, and the same would be true for child support.
Representative Clayton.
No, I'm just thinking.
Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just out of curiosity, how many people would be taking advantage of this? How many people, I can see you have a lot of support, so I can see that on here. But how many actual people do you think would fall into this category that can't currently do it today? I talked to several landlords that I actually offered as well. They think it's a big part of their process of being competitive, right? That they're able to move on these things. But most of them have, say less than 20 rentals. But how many people do you think this would affect?
Well, that would be actually pretty impossible to quantify because there is no landlord list.
I get that, but in the back of your head, you have to say, hey, this is going to help more than one person, right? So is this going to help hundreds of people, thousands of people, or a couple hundred people, or tens of thousands of people? Going through the process, what does your gut tell you that this is going to help? Or would want to take advantage of this?
I would anticipate that it would be thousands of people. They're 1/3 of Kansans rent. So, and just judging from the amount of interactions that I've had with different people across the state, and even just from landlords that I've talked to across the state that have talked to me directly and told me that they won't do this themselves, I would say it's probably fairly substantial.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so the bill is written in a way that all the payments aren't supposed to be made on the same day. Is that something you're open to changing so they don't have to track partial payments?
Multiple payments, not necessarily partial payments, but I think that's an important differentiation, because what we're talking about, for example, when I pay my mortgages are mandated by mortgage companies are mandated by the federal government to allow multiple payments. And so if I want to pay part of my mortgage out of each paycheck, I'm allowed to do so. And I have the individual freedom to make that choice as a homeowner. And so I don't see why a renter should not have that individual liberty to do that, have that flexibility also. Many types of workers, including healthcare workers, for example, get paid weekly or biweekly. So if they want to manage their money in that way, I don't see why they should not have the freedom and option to do so, as long as they pay on time.
Okay. Any further questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much. Oh, wait, what? Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. So basically, you're saying they could actually make a payment a day for 30 days.
I'm sorry, say that one more time?
So would they have the flexibility to make a payment a day for 30 days and still make their rent payment?
I would suggest that that's one of the things that needs to be clarified in language, is that I think there should be some parameters put in here. As I've talked to some landlords, because I have been seeking landlords' feedback on this, now that, it took some, of course, time to get this bill drawn up from the revisors. And once I've had that, that's one of the questions that I got and feedback I got from landlords. And so I think we need to clarify the language to put some limitations on that and give the landlords the authority to specify some limitations on that, because obviously, and I think having the ability to put a reasonable fee on, if the landlords are being charged a fee, for example, that kind of thing would be very reasonable to have in there.
Because the follow-up to this that I'm thinking about, it might be tough for the landlords to be able to make their financial obligations if they've got 20 or 30 people or 100 people strung out here trying to get the rent paid for him to maintain the apartments he might have. So that seems to be something that needs to be worked out there a little bit, I think.
But if it's being made on time, I don't think that will be an issue, if it's being paid on time.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so going back to the chair brought up on to where it's, I guess, the teeth of the bill. I tried to look briefly through the Landlord Tenant Act. Is that language consistent in the statute, or is that new teeth language that's brought into the bill? You may not know the answer, and that might be a revisor question.
I'm not exactly wholly sure about that.
Charles, I don't know if you...
Charles.
Thank you, Chairman. So, Representative, are you referring to the provisions, sort of the provisions that come into play when when a landlord fails to comply with the requirement that that a tenant can submit partial payments? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, so to any person who fails to comply requirements, also any actual damages sustained, and then any amount of punitive damages as a court may allow.
So I would need to check to make sure, but I think this would probably be in addition to any provisions in the Landlord Tenant Act. I need to check to make sure about that. But you'll see there in subsection B, lines 24, 25, that those specific remedies are in addition to any other requirements and remedies provided by law. So if there was anything else in the Landlord Tenant Act, that would also be applicable.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Seeing no further questions. Representative Wassinger.
Oops, thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been questioning about this bill. And I think that Representative Corbett brought up a really good point. It would scare me to death that they were making payments every day for 30, 31, 28 days. That just can't happen. And I'll tell you the multiple payments, and I think I've said this to you before, is that I rent mostly to college students near Fort Hays. And splitting their rent payments into two just causes more trouble for them because they think they have more money and then they don't keep the rest of the money and then it's gone. So it's kind of a big change without being totally specific, but I think there is tweaking that needs to be done, because looking at it right now and changing the Landlord Tenant Act as drastically as this is a problem for me. So you plan amendments to it, or?
Well, and I'm certainly open to amendments and clarifying language. And
Okay.
I think if the chair will allow, I think there's also room for clarifying language on allowing some clarity in what kind of payments, like what forms of payments landlords should be, they should get to have a say on, like if they wanted to reject Bitcoin, for example, as payments. But I also think we also might need to clarify as a state that landlords demanding cash-only payments from renters is also not acceptable, because I know that that is happening in our county, because I witnessed that in court, in eviction court. And that's obviously problematic.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, seeing no further questions, thank you very much. We're going to move on to the next
Thank you.
oral proponent. Christy Bogman. Okay, we're going to limit you to 3 minutes and hit on the things that she didn't discuss. You hit that button, make sure the light's on the microphone.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Got it. Okay, go ahead.
Chair Tarwater and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House Bill 2768. My name is Christy Boffman. I'm Executive Director for United Community Services of Johnson County. We spend a lot of our time working with folks and communities across the state to stabilize housing for Kansans. And I'm also a small landlord, so I'm kind of here today speaking from both perspectives. As Executive Director of UCS, I'm very interested in keeping Kansans housed, and as a landlord, I'm very interested in keeping my tenants in my properties and paying on time. I support this bill because I feel like it reflects what works in the real world, both for tenants and for landlords. Representative Howell mentioned that nearly a third of Kansans are renters. That's almost 400,000 units that are rental units across the state. And I think that Representative Howell also mentioned how the rental market has changed. We see a lot of automation in our rental systems now that don't necessarily make it easier for people to make payments, but actually they create barriers that make it more difficult for people to pay rent. 2768 addresses a couple of common sense fixes. One, allowing tenants to make multiple payments towards rent as long as rent is paid on time. Accepting multiple payments supports both responsible behavior and keeps rent flowing without undermining my rights as a landlord. I can say that as a small landlord, and when I say small, I mean small. My husband and I have a duplex, so 2 units, but this is part of our financial future, right? So when I am talking about rentals, they're very important to me. I want to keep my tenants there. I don't want them to leave. I want them to stay. I want them to pay on time. And so making this possible, if that helps my tenants stay in the property, that's important to me. And then second, the bill requires landlords use income thresholds to consider all lawful income. So this includes veterans benefits, disability income, child support, and pensions. These are stable sources of income that should be included when we're trying to decide who should be able to stay in our units. It does not force me as a landlord to accept any kind of payment. It just requires that I consider it when I'm deciding whether or not to have a tenant in my property. And from my perspective as UCS, preventing unnecessary evictions, keeping people hastily housed is a really effective way to stabilize communities. And from my perspective as a landlord, keeping good tenants housed is a goal for me. So I support 2768 and respectfully urge your support as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to hold questions till the end, if any. Next up is Rabbi Modi. Welcome back to Commerce, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Rabbi Moti Reber. I am the Executive Director of Kansas Interfaith Action. We are a statewide multi-faith issue advocacy organization that works on a variety of important justice issues, including economic justice issues. We have partnerships with many of the mainline denominations, including the ELCA, the Church of Christ, and the United Methodist Church, as well as hundreds of congregations and thousands of people of faith throughout Kansas. KIFA, Kansas Interfaith Action, is a member of the Kansas Housing Advocacy Network, which is a statewide network of advocacy organizations and providers and COCs that have a three-pronged approach to the issue of housing and homelessness. One is increasing the stock of affordable housing that's available, which is a great shortage in Kansas. The second one is stabilizing people in danger of losing their homes. And the third one is getting homeless people rehoused as quickly as possible. So this falls into the second category. So I want to encourage you to think about this from the tenant's perspective, at least momentarily, instead of from the landlord's perspective. So we believe that this addresses two critical barriers to housing stability, the lump sum rent constraints and the income discrimination issue. So most corporate landlords have the ability, and I think regular small landlords also have the use online payment portals. These can be set to accept multiple payments, but in Kansas they're not required to. So this would allow that. For instance, this would be a situation where if somebody gets paid twice a month, they could pay half the rent twice a month. Also, the question of accounting all income. The one thing I'll add, many of the potential sources of income have been enumerated today, but I'll also mention that in this day and age, there's a lot of gig work, there's a lot of freelance work, there's a lot of consulting work, and these come in different, they might not be on regular schedules. So we want people to be able to, that's a very common thing in this day and age, is for people to be doing work that's not traditional paycheck work. So we want to be able to accommodate that as well. I'll also say that congregations are often first responders when people are in need. When I talk to clergy around the state, homelessness is always one of the issues that they bring up. And there are times when congregations accept extended assistance, either on a temporary basis or an ongoing basis, to some of their members. Usually it's a temporary need, but also you could have a situation where somebody's helping support somebody who's going through seminary or something like that. So we think that that would also be helpful. I mean, Catholic Charities does that, Jewish Family Services does that. Nothing in this bill prevents or eliminates any obligation from the tenant to the landlord. Rent has to be paid on the due date. We do come to this perspective from our position that every person has inherent dignity, and that our laws should reflect a commitment to the common good and protection of the less fortunate.
Your time is up.
Okay, thank you. I urge you to vote yes, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for co-sponsoring the bill.
Yep. You bet. It's written a little differently than I thought it was, but you're welcome. Next up is Dalton Black, but I think it's written only. Yes. Sister Amy Wilcott. Okay, we'll move her to, we're on WebEx, got it.
Can you?
We hear you.
Yes, okay, thank you very much, Chair and Committee. I am Sister Amy Wilcott, and I am the Director of DePaul Leavenworth Attainable Housing here in Leavenworth. And so we have 19 scattered site houses. So I am a landlord and also a nonprofit. And I guess what I would say, I cheer on Rabbi Modi, but the challenge for us as nonprofits is that people come to us then when landlords are either changing the rules or when someone has come into hard times, and the ability to pay the multiple payments really is the difference between eviction, homelessness, and them maintaining their employment and maintaining their housing. And so that's what we try to do with a program here in Leavenworth. But it really is kind of supporting the human element. Everyone hits hard times and faces challenges, but I believe that this bill is a win-win, both for the landlord and the tenant. So I would ask for your yes vote. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your testimony. We're going to move on to Casey Johnson on WebEx, Kansas Legal Services.
Thank you. Chairman and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Casey Johnson. I represent Kansas Legal Services, and I'm here today to give proponent testimony. While my written testimony details the technical legal disparities between tenants and homeowners regarding interest and tender payment, I want to speak to you today about the shifting reality of the Kansas rental market and the human cost of current practices. The Kansas housing landscape has undergone a dramatic transformation. In our region, corporate landlords now own nearly 80% of all multifamily units. These out-of-area entities are nearly 4 times more likely to file for eviction than local mom-and-pop property owners. And this is not a coincidence. These large-scale investors rely on automated payment systems that frequently serve as a digital wall, locking out tenants who are attempting to pay their rent in full, which often triggers a lucrative fees and interest cycle and often ends with eviction. If a landlord refuses a partial payment, they can then sue the tenant in limited actions court for that amount plus 12% judgment interest. HB 2768 is a common sense intervention that prevents these automated systems from being used as a weapon against working families who have the money in hand. Turning to the income provisions of this bill, we're often contacted by disabled veterans and seniors who are told that their money is no good because it comes from a benefit check rather than a paycheck. We're haunted by the words of one veteran who shared her experience with a reporter after being turned away. She said, I was good enough to serve my country, but not good enough to live in your neighborhood. This bill provides a balanced solution. It does not mandate the acceptance of Section 8 vouchers, but it does require that landlords consider verifiable, lawful income, such as VA benefits and Social Security. These are benefits that many Kansas families rely on to survive. And by ensuring that a veteran's disability check or a mother's child support is counted as real income, we can achieve stability for vulnerable Kansas without infringing on a landlord's right to use other objective screening tools like credit and rental history. Stable housing is the absolute foundation for healthy lives, successful schools, and economic opportunity. HB 2768 ensures that Kansans who have the means to pay their rent are not locked out by a computer portal or discriminatory policy. We respectfully ask for your support, and I'll remain available for questions.
Okay, thank you, Casey. We're going to move on to Molly Mendenhall, Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition on WebEx.
Yes, hello, Chairman Tarwater and members of the committee. My name is Molly Mendenhall. I'm the Director of Statewide Initiatives for Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition. We support HB 2768 because it will be instrumental in preventing homelessness in Kansas. You have my written testimony, but there's a couple of things that this will do. It will allow Kansans who are in a financial crisis to receive assistance in making that in multiple payments. So if someone can pay part of their rent but not all of it, they can go seek services from some sort of organization like Catholic Charities to help them pay the rest of that rent. And that would be a multiple payment because it's coming from 2 different places. Not only does that allow them to stay housed, it also allows the organizations to assist more households in Kansas because they are now not paying a full amount of rent. They are paying part of the rent, and so that money can stretch farther. This does not take away any of the rights of landlords to, evict for non-payment of rent, but it does allow our landlords to keep their tenants longer. It saves them money by not having to file for evictions, not having to pay court fees, and it also saves resources like our law enforcement who actually go out and perform those evictions when they happen. With less evictions, they are free to do more things and prevent crime in other ways and tackle public safety issues instead of evicting Kansans for just trying to pay their rent in, multiple payments in a variety of ways. I'm happy to stand for any questions, and I thank you for your support on this bill.
Okay, thank you, Molly. We're going to move on to Talita Lickman.
Hi, yeah, thanks for the chance to speak. To avoid redundancy, I'm going to jump right to giving a few specific examples of where this could be helpful, and to kind of speak to Representative Kessler's question about, to what extent this would be helpful for Kansans. So my name's Tilly Lakem. I'm a clinical social worker providing community mental health services in Johnson County, Kansas. And so, in one recent example of this, a client of mine renting in Lenexa had to change her normal payment method after she lost her job while caring for her two aging parents who were both in health crises. My client's partner, who had disability income, was able to pay part of the rent, and my client was approved for emergency rental assistance. Due to the landlord's policy against multiple payments, as well as restrictions on payment methods, and other limitations like my client lacking transportation and their bank not having cashier's check services, she really struggled to problem solve that situation despite having the money in hand. After a lot of stress and effort on her part and a lot of service hours on my team's part, she was able to make that payment, but only after her rent was late and she had racked up over $100 in late fees. In a similar situation, also recent, another client of mine who was an elderly person with leukemia and severe depression, struggling with her health as well with severe vertigo. Her head voucher was paying most of her rent, but her landlord refused to accept her portion of the payment, saying that it was a partial payment, even though my client had consistently paid on time. Due to difficulty actually reaching anybody in the leasing office, which I can personally attest to, like is very much oftentimes the case in the larger complexes, my client ended up being given an eviction notice. We were finally able to resolve the issue with help from Kansas Disability Rights Legal Support. And we finally learned that she had outstanding fees that she wasn't aware of. So once we knew that was a problem, it was resolved, but only after weeks of stress on her part and an accrual of late fees. Finally, to speak to the income consideration portion, I recently had a disabled veteran who I worked with who got so frustrated with applying for apartments that wouldn't accept his income, which included disability as well as part-time employment, that he eventually ended up living in his car for a while because he kept just losing his application and admin fees when being turned down by apartments. And unfortunately, there isn't a great number to speak to the number of people who would be impacted by this, but I can say anecdotally, I'm one very small part of what is one of many organizations doing similar work in Johnson County, and me and my team deal with this on like a multiple times a week basis. So I would say it would be very impactful. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. And we're going to move on to Jessica Smith on WebEx, KCK Public Schools.
Hi, I'll try not to be redundant. My name is Jessica Smith. I'm the McKinney Rental Liaison for Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools. In case you are not aware of what McKinney Rental Program is, it is a federally supported program that ensures when a family or student becomes homeless, the student is able to stay at their school of origin. It also ensures that a student does not have any barriers to enrollment when they become homeless. Families become homeless for various reasons. It may be a fire, it may be divorce. However, the vast majority of families become homeless due to eviction. While HB 2768 won't stop all families from being evicted, of course, it could save homes for several families. These days, families are struggling to make ends meet. At times, paying rent in its entirety can take up to someone's entire paycheck. This could leave a family with no money for food, hygiene products, or any other needs for up to 2 weeks. Just imagine if a landlord would take a rent payment in 2 payments. This could allow a family to budget in a more realistic way. This could save several families from ever having to qualify for the McKinney Rental Program. Imagine having a child with a major disability that does not allow you to work full-time as the caregiver. You depend on 3 sources of income to make the ends meet: a part-time paycheck, a disability check, and child support. But when applying for an apartment or a new home, the management tells you they can only accept the income from your part-time job. That takes away 2/3 of your income. Now you don't qualify. If House Bill 2768 comes into effect, a landlord will be able to accept all sources of income that they can offer. House Bill 2768 does not cut landlords short. It does not offer anything free or let tenants get away with anything. What it does is offer a different option for families that are already struggling, families that are already concerned about so many other things in the world. Why make them stress about and worry about their home? I know someone asked how many people we think this would affect. As of today, we serve, and I work for Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools, so that's in Wyandotte County. We serve over 300 families, and I would say this bill would help at least half of those families not qualify for us and be able to stay in their homes. Thank you so much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much. Next up, Justin Gust on WebEx.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much, committee, for allowing us to testify. My name is Justin Gust. I'm the Vice President of Community Engagement here at El Centro. We're a nonprofit that serves both Wyandotte and Johnson counties, and we are proponents of this bill. I, in my tenure of 11 years at El Centro, have overseen a lot of our emergency assistance programming here in Johnson County and can tell you on hand, I've seen at least 4 families that were evicted from their home because they were not able to receive assistance from us, not because we didn't want to, but because their landlord would not accept more than one payment for rent. In our policies here, we're not able to give money directly to clients or to families to pay for those things. We just have our payment go directly to the landlord. So for us, it is huge because we have seen landlords evict our families that we're trying to help due to this very reason of not accepting more than just one payment. For us, we serve about 80 families, 80 households each year with rental assistance. So it would affect all 80 of those families. Um, Essentially, if their landlords decided that they weren't going to accept multiple payments or work with us. So I'm trying to keep people housed. I also will share too, personally, I've been a lifelong renter here in Johnson County. I've lived in 10 different apartment complexes in the last 15 years in different cities. And for me too, I've had a personal moment in my life where I had to ask for assistance from a friend to help pay my rent. I was short, not a lot, but like $300. And unfortunately, my landlord made the process very complicated. They said, you just have to have one payment. It has to be from you. My friend didn't feel comfortable giving me the money herself. She would prefer to pay my landlord. And they said, well, that's fine, but it can only be one payment. But also, since you're not a tenant here, it has to be a cashier's check. So I had to end up providing what rent I was able to pay to her, have her go request a cashier's check from her bank, take it to my landlord. And the whole process was embarrassing, to be honest. Luckily she was able to support me, but there shouldn't be a reason that people can't make multiple payments if they're paying the rent on time. The other issue I've run into in my life personally is working out situations with roommates or people who have multiple people who are financially responsible for the rent, and having to decide who's going to pay what month, what time, when your landlord only accepts one payment does make it very hard. And it does make it hard for you to figure out, if I pay this portion or this month, is my roommate going to pay next month? Because people have different living situations, this and that. So we strongly urge you to consider the benefits of this bill and how they will help tenants across Kansas. We appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you. I'm not showing any other proponents on the bill. Is there anyone in person, anyone else here in person that wants to testify as a proponent? Okay, seeing none. Are there any questions for any of the conferees? Representative Sutton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question goes to, I believe it was El Centro. The initials were JC, but I missed your name. Sorry.
Justin, yeah.
Justin, okay, Justin, this question's for you. One of the things that you mentioned was that your organization only gives money to the landlord and not not the tenant directly to pay their bills, and because of that, they're sometimes evicted. I'm curious as to the policy in place, why it wouldn't go straight to the tenant to keep them from being evicted. I'm not following. I realize we're trying
Yeah.
to solve a problem here, but I'm not sure what the issue here is with the organization as far as creating that problem.
Yeah, for us, it's to ensure that the money is going to what the purpose is. Not that we don't trust the families we serve, but just like other government programs, childcare assistance, those funds don't go directly to the people; they go directly to the daycare providers. So, kind of the same thing in that sense that we want to make sure that our financial help is actually going towards rent, and if we give it to the family, we can't guarantee that unless we're physically there in the office with them at the time that they make their rent payment. So it's very similar to kind of other existing programs like childcare assistance, where that money doesn't go directly to the person, it goes to the daycare provider.
Oh, all right. It just, if I could continue just a little bit, it just seems to me that to choose that they would be evicted, I mean, it kind of does sound like you're not trusting them. I mean, to choose eviction rather than uh, maybe a handshake agreement with the rent assistance. I'm not sure I'm following the logic here.
Well, we're also not the ones choosing to evict the client. Their landlord is, because they will not take a check from us and a check from the client. Is essentially what it boils down to. They're the ones deciding to proceed with the eviction, even though we're offering the assistance and we're saying we have the payment ready for you. We can even deliver a check directly to your office. But the landlords are the ones deciding not to accept that payment. So that would be a good question for them.
I'll let it go with that. Thank you.
Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you're here, you can answer it. I mean, anyone can answer this one probably. I'm kind of coming back to the part where if a landlord does not accept the partial payment, that payment will be deducted or dismissed or whatever. What is that? Do you know what that time frame looks like? What does that look like? If I'm a landlord and you tried to pay me money and I said no, let's start the clock right there. How's this process work? Anybody can answer that if they want to step up.
I can speak to that. No one else wants to. So my understanding of how the process will work is that all of the payments have to be made before the ultimate rent is due. So if somebody makes a partial payment and the landlord doesn't accept it, then that amount will be discharged. So that's just like if you're paying your mortgage. The Uniform Commercial Code says that if you tender the amount owed under a negotiable instrument and whoever is owed that money doesn't accept it, that amount is forfeited. So in this case, same with rent. If the tenant made that offer, so let's say they wanted to pay $500 out of the $1,000 of rent, they made that offer to pay it, the landlord didn't accept it, then that amount would be discharged. The tenant would then only owe $500, and let's say the tenant ended up not paying. Then the landlord would have that as a defense in court. They would say, look, the law says that they have to pay in full. They didn't do that. I didn't accept the $500, but they never offered the other $500. Or worst case, or if the tenant does offer the other $500 and the landlord doesn't accept that, they go to court, try to evict the tenant for non-payment of rent. The tenant would then at that point be able to sue the landlord and say, look, I offered them $1,000. Here's my first email or whatever where I offered $500. Here's my second email where I offered $500. That amount should be discharged. And I should get my attorney fees for basically having to go to court over this when I offered to pay. That's my understanding of how this would work.
So you're talking that could take months?
Very unlikely. So it would take 1 month just for the landlord to. Most people pay on a monthly basis, and so the rent would be due for 1 month. And so let's say you didn't pay the tenant didn't pay in March or offered the 2 payments in March. Landlord didn't accept them. April 1st comes around. The landlord sends the tenant a 3-day notice saying you owe me rent. If you don't pay within 3 days, I'm going to evict you. The tenant responds saying, I already offered to pay you, that amount's discharged. After 3 days, the landlord could file in court. Those court cases usually last about 2 weeks. The statute says that answering has to be held within 3 to 14 days, and that the trial has to be held within 14 days after that. But most courts do it 7 and 7 days. So we're talking probably about 2 weeks after the 3-day notice period.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we're gonna leave the questions there. Thanks everyone for attending and tuning in. We have several written-only proponents on there. We have a couple of written-only neutrals, and we do have an opponent here, Ed Jaskina. Thanks for coming in, Ed. 1 against like 25, so I don't think that's very fair. They're gonna need more people, right? Hit the button.
Well, there we go. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Ed Jaskinia. I'm representing the Associated Landlords of Kansas. I passed out my written testimony so you can kind of follow along if I get sidetracked, but it's pretty simple. You require in bookkeeping nightmares when you mandate multiple payments. Most landlords, or a lot of them at least, already do this. I mean, I certainly do. If they want to make multiple payments, fine. But when you're talking about a whole bunch of people doing it at the same time, the bookkeeping is a nightmare. You have to write receipts for each one of these payments. It can be a real nightmare. What happens if they pay, suppose the rent's $100 for sake of argument, and they pay $25, then $25, and then $25, but they never pay the final $25. Well, most tenants believe that that's an automatic extension. Well, it's not. They're late. And then when we give them a 3-day notice or charge late fees, they get all upset. But the fact is they have not paid their full rent in time. So let the landlord and the tenant work this out between themselves. Don't make the state mandate it for us. Most landlords want their money. Our worst case scenario, in case nobody notices, is evicting somebody. It costs us a tremendous amount of money when we evict somebody. We'll lose a minimum of 3 months' rent typically between the lost rent, getting it ready for rehab and everything else. So most landlords bend over backwards not to do that. And I'm not saying all do. There's some slumlords out there, we know that. But most landlords want to work with the tenants. Section 2 requires to accept all lawful sources of money. Well, I mean, that's fine, but are we going to do that with banks and car loans and everything else too? There's some sources of money that are more suspect than others. Let's take alimony, for example. 10% of alimony is paid. I'm sorry, I'm misquoting here. 10% of the people get alimony. 50% of them do not get a dime. Same with child support. So me personally, and most landlords I know, will accept those forms of payments, but we want to see a history of those payments being made. I'm sorry, 40-some-odd% of child support payments are never made. So if you want to take that risk, fine, but mandating it is something else. Turning over the key, my last comment on the sheet that I have here, turning over the keys to a property valued at tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars requires a thorough assessment of the risk you're willing to take. This is a risk business. It can be a real money loss if people don't do what they're supposed to do. So I'm trying to make this as quick as I can. So if you've got any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
We do have one question. Representative Clayton.
I do understand what you are saying, but I think that it is appropriate to state for the record and for the public that it is not the recipients of child support and alimony that are a risk. It is the trash who does not follow their court order. So let's just try to change our narrative on this a little bit, but I do understand what you're saying.
Didn't mean to make it sound that way. You know, deadbeats are deadbeats. We know that, so.
Well, she's on record for hating men, so it's okay.
Just the bad ones.
Well,
any further questions?
If it
Representative
makes you
Shue.
feel any better, 38% of custodial fathers never receive a dime, whereas 29% of custodial mothers never do. So it's pretty equal. It's not like it was in the 80s. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of reading the room a little bit and reading your testimony, it sounds like Section 1 is very difficult probably for a lot of the committee to swallow, and certainly landlords. I support it, but I can read the room. But it sounds like Section 2 is much more doable for you. You expressed some concerns, but you did say you thought it was doable.
I'm sorry. Say, I missed your point here. Sorry.
Are you okay with Section 2?
No. No, because we've got to do a proper risk management. If there's a history of partial payments and whatever, I can't do it. We're turning over the keys to a very valuable piece of property, and if I can't show that there's child support payments made every month, they're only made half the time, then that means half of the income they're declaring isn't really there. And I hate to pick on child support because that's not the only thing. You have charity places that will say, we're going to donate money for this cause and whatever, but that can be cut off tomorrow. And it is cut off sometimes. So.
If I may, Mr. Chair, where in Section 2 does it say you cannot verify that income? It just says you have to consider it.
Well, you can verify it, but that's verification for today. And I want to see a year's history on these things. So.
Yes.
I just think it's the way it's worded just doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry.
Representative Corbett.
Thanks, Chairman. One of the thoughts that I had on that, would you, if we work this bill, which I think is government overreach, but for every time you had a payment, would you be okay with a convenience fee for processing each fee to get the rent paid? I'm trying to figure out how to, if you have to go 5 or 6 times or 10 times to collect the rent, there's got to be some way to compensate your trouble for trying to make that work. I don't know how, that's not in this bill.
Wouldn't that hurt the tenant?
Well, maybe.
I'm not anti-tenant in any sense of the word. Tenants are what pays the bills, but we've got to make it where it makes sense.
Okay, I'm not seeing any further questions for you, sir. Is there anyone else in the room that is an opponent that wishes to speak? Okay, seeing none. We're going to close the hearing on HB 2768. And thank you all for coming. We're going to shift gears here to welcome to Commerce Conversations. And we're going to bring up Steve Phillimer. Man, there's a lot of names today that I'm just butchering, so just tell us what your name is when you get up here, and we'll go from there. Thanks for coming in today, and we're excited to hear about modular housing. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name is Steve Fellmeyer from Wichita. I retired a couple years ago. I was the CFO for Koch Industries for 25 years. Prior to that, I worked for PepsiCo, did a lot of real estate work for both companies. I'm very interested in real estate, but when asked by the company to spend some time thinking about affordable housing, I didn't know much about it. So I spent a lot of time my last couple years studying what affordable housing meant to most people. What I learned is that it is a significant problem. In Wichita alone, there's 157,000 households, and most people estimate that we're short 25,000 homes for primarily affordable housing. We're short attainable housing as well. You know, people that have incomes that can afford homes, but can they actually get into the houses is a separate question these days. Construction prices have doubled the last 7 years. They've tripled the last 15 years, and incomes have not kept up. Affordability levels are at all-time lows, and that causes the increased pressure on affordable housing. I spent time trying to study why people haven't attacked the problem, and there are a lot of agencies and organizations and people with big hearts seeking social justice and wanting things to get done, but very few people actually doing anything about it. And that's the problem. When I say very few people, it starts with the people in the general contracting trade. And it's simply a matter of economics. If you have the chance as a general contractor to go build, let's say, $300,000 or $400,000 custom homes, you're going to make a living of $300,000 a year. You know, or instead, if you choose to spend your time to go work on affordable housing, where your price point needs to be $125,000 a year for each house, and you find one mistake, you know, one problem with the lot, a buried foundation or something else that's going to cost you $10,000 you didn't see coming, there is zero profitability on that house. And that's why there are absolutely no builders working on affordable housing throughout the country. And that's why everybody thinks it's a government problem that needs to be solved. So the question became, you know, why are the construction costs so high, and what can we do to get those down? That's the first question. The second question is, what really is a decent affordable house? You know, 75% of the folks that need affordable housing are typically single-family parents with 2 to 3 kids. And so it may not be that a multifamily apartment complex is the answer for everybody. You know, most people grew up in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in single-family residences, and we've seemed to have gotten away from that because it's more expensive. You lose density. You need to go vertical. You need to leverage the land basis. And so that's how people think about it. I'm focused on building and focus on affordability of single-family residences. And third, it's the capital cost. And when you have those three together, you need to make something affordable. And the way Section 8 would define affordable is 30% of your income. And let's say that's going to result in rents of $1,000 a month. It's very difficult for a home that costs more than $125,000 with a 30-year amortization, even at a 5 or 6% interest rate, for the landlord to defease the investment in that house. You end up losing money, barely breaking even. And again, that's why you don't have the investment in affordable housing. In Wichita, the only ones that have been working on affordable housing really the last 20 or 30 years in a significant way would be not-for-profits like Habitat for Humanity or Mennonite Housing. So I decided to tackle the problem in my own way when I retired. I realized we would need substantial capital to start making an impact. You know, for me to make an impact, it would be to do it one house at a time. And we set out to raise a fund that would have the capability to loan money to others in a low-cost way or to take equity investments. And I got lucky because I stumbled on something that the banks need, and that's called CRA credit. CRA stands for Community Reinvestment Act, for those of you that are not bankers in the room. And if you are a bank and you receive a state license or a federal license, you're required by law to bank people in the same way, to make products and services and rates available to everybody, including low-income housing. And if you're a bank examiner coming into a bank, they will make sure that you are offering mortgages and other products to low-income households. The problem the banks have is there's no demand. You could want to go and create products for these entities, but if there's nobody borrowing money, making the investments, then the banks can't meet their CRA credits. So they're very interested in what we might be able to do as a catalyst to help them with activity and volume. And so we were able to raise a surprising amount of money, $15 million in the city, to attack the affordable housing problem. The timing was good because the city, like most public housing authorities, decided to get out of the public housing business with HUD. HUD built many, many homes back in the 1940s with World War II. This follows the housing acts that were created following the Great Depression. And those homes got lived in but not reinvested in for 85 years. And in Wichita, for example, 75% of them are boarded up, unoccupied, and used for other issues like drug use, prostitution, et cetera, you name it. And it became a real problem, not an opportunity where people are occupying them. So finally, the city decided to start divesting them. So the timing of creating this fund was good because we've been able to start acquiring them and remodeling them. We've worked with Habitat for Humanity. We've worked with not-for-profits. We've worked with others. We're in the process right now of remodeling 75 homes. Each one of those takes about $125,000 to $150,000. We're finding you have to go down to the studs. You have to completely gut them. We're finding mold, massive problems with the interiors, but it's still, when we're done, a beautiful refurbished home. But still, as we studied this, the costs were just too high, even on a refurbished, remodeled home, too high. So we started studying what are the other alternatives here to produce homes, And we stumbled across a group in Tulsa, a family that quit their jobs, a husband and wife team, and went and built modular housing factory in the Tulsa area. We brought some of those homes to Wichita. We tested the model. We got a lot of feedback. Most of it was great. People loved them. Some of it was not so great. We need to work on the aesthetics. We need to work on the optics so they don't look like mobile homes. They look like regular stick-built, beautiful homes in a neighborhood. But the feedback was so good that we decided to separately start a factory in Wichita. We've raised $15 million of capital. The Commerce Department has been helpful with some of the pre-existing programs for us to do that, HPIP and PEAK, for example. And we're in the middle of renovating a factory on the northeast part of Wichita. It's actually a distribution center where we will have a 159,000 square foot warehouse producing modular homes at a price point of about $100 a square foot. And if you've been out shopping for a new home in your neighborhood, in Johnson County, you're looking at $250 a square foot and up. In other parts of the state, including Wichita, you're looking at $200 a square foot. The price between what we can do in a modular setting, because it's a factory-controlled environment, where we're able to bulk buy and we're able to leverage the economies of scale of a factory, are enormous. And you end up with a price point or a cost savings of 50% on a good portion of the cost structure of the house. Now, when a house leaves that factory and it has to be transported to a location, we have to get it on a foundation. We're still working on those costs. We're kind of at parity. You got to pour a foundation, you have to pour a foundation. Doesn't matter if it's stick-built or if it was built in the factory. But still have an enormous advantage. So our goal is to build 300 a year in the first year. We can do that with one shift. The factory is big enough that we'll be able to build 36 simultaneously. We could run 3 shifts. We could do 900. That will be a high-class problem if we end up doing 900 homes a year. But the demand is there. The demand is there. As I mentioned, just in Wichita, there's 157,000 households. We probably need 25,000 for affordable housing. How do you equilibrate that? Where does that number come from? Well, if you look at the Section 8 waiting list alone, which they don't release the numbers, but they're generally understood when the list isn't closed to have over 10,000 people just in Wichita on that waiting list. And we know that there's 3,000 people receiving Section 8 vouchers. There's 3,000 people living in Section 42 multifamily apartment complexes. You're getting back pretty close to 25,000 people that need this kind of assistance. And if you look at the poverty line at 16.7% roughly, times 157,000 households, that gets you back to the same number, 25,000 households just in Wichita that need affordable housing, yet no supply, no incentives really for most builders to go work on it. So we're taking a bit of a risk in our retirement here. My wife thinks we're crazy because we've taken on a second job, but it's a passion. It's a passion to try to create a new business model that hopefully could become a replica in every major city across the country. You know, to actually make this work, you need to be in the location with the factory because you can transport 150 miles before you start losing your economies of scale. You need to be able to do it with a forklift and not a crane. You know, almost 90% of the modular in the world is transported and ultimately put on a foundation with a crane. That's an $18,000 per day rental. And if you're building a $100,000 house, that does not work. So what's really exciting about the technology we're bringing to the factory is it doesn't require crane rentals. We can set these things with typical modified forklifts so long as we build the house in a way that it can use the forklift. We can use automated cutting technology. We will have second chance labor in our facility, but none of them are going to need to be walking around with circular saws cutting up wood. That'll all be done overnight with automated machines, CNC machines, where you preload the machine with 2x4s, 4x4s, and 2x8s, et cetera. When you come in the next morning, that house will be pre-cut already and labeled so that the crews that are going to install that lumber and erected into walls and foundation and floors, et cetera, know how to do it. It's like working with a Lego set at that point. So that's the project in Wichita. Commerce has been very helpful so far. Lieutenant Governor Tolan has already been supportive with some job training. We're in the process of hiring upwards of 100 people in the next couple of months to work in this factory. We're working on second chance labor. That's been very successful for the sister company down in Tulsa. I find the second chance labor to be great sources of labor. And I realized that just recently, in the last couple of weeks, you passed a separate bill where there was a question about whether or not second chance labor in the prison system should be allowed to work on modular housing. And the answer to that is why not? I mean, it's a great opportunity for people in the prison system to actually skill up, get skills, things that they can do when they actually leave the system, and hopefully it leads to less recidivism, as has already been demonstrated in Leavenworth and Hutch with the programs they already have there. So I think that was a great decision, and I applaud the Senate for your actions to vote that through. So that's what we're doing. I'm here to answer any questions, but I just want to let you know that we're coming. The plant will be open in May, and for those of you that are in Wichita, we'll probably be giving tours on a daily basis. We'll show you what it looks like to build 36 of these at a time.
Wow, so thanks for coming. We talk in this room quite a bit about affordable housing and the problems, and it's nice to finally hear someone that has somewhat of a solution. I mean, may not be for everyone, but you're telling us that you could sell a house for $100,000, or is that your cost and you sell it for $110 or $120?
We could build it for $85, and we're going to equip it with furniture and fixtures and appliances for $5 a square foot. When you go into a Section 8 rental, you have to remember the client that is in there, they didn't have any money. So you think that they're going to be furnishing this house themselves. No, the mattresses are on the floors. The window coverings are sheets. And the rugs, the throw rugs under the sofa that may or may not have legs is towels. We can do that because of economies of scale and the buying power that we intend to have for $3 a square foot. It's all included. It's all included. The goal is that you need to be the type of manufacturer that's interested in selling this stuff at the lowest possible cost. I know that's not the way most businesses work. They want to optimize their profit margin. And I did that for plenty of years at Coke. You know, our goal now is to try to show people there's a different path. There was an RHID program on Harper, just to take a sidestep. And I was excited about it because they'd actually instituted HRID. They understood it. They'd taken a piece of land. They had put it out for RFP. They have 2 model homes, 14 lots. They're looking for people to come in and take the lots. 0 sales price, 5-year property tax abatement, taking advantage of the 15 years that comes with the RHID, and a $30,000 tax credit. They've been sitting vacant for a year. And the city council and the mayor is trying to figure out, why is nobody interested in these lots? It's because the 2 model homes are $300,000 each. It's that simple. So I wrote to the mayor and said, look, in your referendum, you exclude mobile and modular. I do not understand why you would do that. For a modular that looks as good or better and is built as good, how about a price point that says $150 to $160 or less with the tax credit? So they're taking that into consideration. Modular is misunderstood because people think it's mobile homes. It's a very different product. It has to be built equal to or better than local code. The only thing different about it is that it's built not on site. In our case, it'll be built 5 miles down the road and then distributed.
Representative Kessler.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Steve, thanks for being here today. Hey, I was one of the, actually many, there's quite a few of us out here that went and toured your the Wichita houses there. I think you had 4 of them right there in a row. Yes. Or 3 unoccupied and 1 occupied there, but I was thoroughly impressed with that. I thought that was absolutely phenomenal. How those feel, how those looked, walking through those. I mean, I think anybody would be proud to live in one of those. I mean, there's low income or low cost housing, but man, they were fantastic though. Kudos to that.
Well, we're really proud of what we did there. I learned a couple lessons. One is don't build on hills. I'm a CPA, so I never understood that. So that will be a while again before I do that. That had a substantial cost. But we wanted to learn. I wanted to work with our partner in Tulsa and have these houses shipped here so that I could feel what it was like to be a customer, somebody that was actually purchasing these. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about working with the local planning department. It's not fun. I learned a lot about working at least in the city of Wichita, where the planning department is actually governed by two different entities, one the city, one the county. And when you're looking for variations, it's really hard to get them. So that's a separate issue I'm working with down there. But it was worth it. Going through the learning because it really changed our thinking about how we were going to deliver for customers here out of this new plant. To make a long story short, full service capability. We're gonna pour the foundations. We're gonna get the permits. We're gonna go work those issues. We're bringing engineering people on staff. So if you have a mobile home park, which we've got 5 people talking to us now, and say it had 100 mobile homes on it at one point. In the city of Wichita, between 1940 and 1942, the population doubled from 100,000 to 200,000 because of the war. And there was an influx of people to build aviation-related warcraft or aircraft. They didn't have a place to live, so mobile home parks sprung up everywhere. They're now 85 years old. They are maybe 25% occupied. The other 75% is empty because the mobile homes are now in the dump. And these folks that own these mobile home parks, they do not know what they're going to do. They just have a piece of land, and they don't have a way to really think about it differently. And we've been working with them to put in, why not, create a new neighborhood, not a mobile home park, but a modular neighborhood with these homes priced between 60 and 100,000. They don't all have to be 1,000, 1,200 square feet or 1,400 square feet, 3 and 4 bedroom, maybe a 1 bedroom, maybe a 2 bedroom. And with permanent foundations, with tornado shelters and clubhouses, and create a new neighborhood. And the economics work, and it's an exciting opportunity.
Representative Bohai.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I love this, so thank you for coming and telling us about this. And
thank you.
Even though I'm from Johnson County, I would love to come down and tour it when the facility's up and running. Quick question. Is there anything legislatively that we need to help with making sure that that your project can succeed?
So there's 2 bills that we're actually working with tax committee later today on. And that's to help the not-for-profits who are customers trying to do affordable housing. One is an exemption from sales tax on building materials. And it's really a parity issue. If you go to Habitat for Humanity, they're already exempted under the code. If you're a CDC, like in the case of Hope CDC in Wichita, it's a pastor, and he's doing not-for-profit housing. When he went to apply for his sales tax exemption, he was denied. And the reason why is because he was not listed under the statute like Habitat, even though they're doing the exact same thing. So that bill, which isn't a lot of money, I think the estimate is $1.5 million a year, but for a not-for-profit that has to write an extra $5,000 or $6,000 check trying to make these numbers work, it matters. And so it's seeking exemption if you're a not-for-profit doing affordable housing on sales tax. The second bill is the same customer, a not-for-profit. It's to allow them property tax exemption if they keep the home in affordable housing use. And the irony of what we're doing right now on the 75 remodels is we've purchased these homes from the city of Wichita, who is managing them on behalf of HUD, and they're doing the exact same thing. They're in affordable use. They've not been on the tax rolls for the last 80 years because they're owned by a government entity. Yet for the privilege of $150,000 to remodel the house, our thank you is a property tax bill. It makes no sense. And when you look at Colorado, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, they get it. They exempt the exact same thing. So we're looking for a little bit more relief for not-for-profits to help them make the numbers work. most people think that government is the only answer, and government is a part of the solution. When you have large projects that need to get done, significant multifamily projects, tax credits still an important answer. But when you're trying to rejuvenate the core of a city, one house at a time, and not-for-profits are a big part of the customer base, we've got to support them a little bit better.
Okay, so last question, Representative Clayton.
Thank you, and thank you for being here. I would be grateful if you could give us some point of reference. I want a visual aid. I don't know if I'll be able to make it down there to tour myself, but I'd love to see what these homes look like, because I think we have a lot of prejudices and misconceptions when it comes to modular homes. I don't think that we realize that technology is caught up. Obviously, local zoning in my district, like Representative Bohai, I also represent part of Johnson County, might not be in love with the idea, but I think a lot of this is, some of it could be a marketing solution where, you know, people see, all right, this is not, you know, your grandparents' modular home.
They're not going to be going into Eastboro much time soon either. I get that, right? But it's a solution for large swaths of major cities. We will send you some photographs and we've got some great marketing materials, and we should have had those up on the screen for you today.
So there's a development not too far from where I live, just outside of my district, actually. And I've driven through it several times as it was being built. The houses literally went up almost overnight, each one. And they brought them in on trucks and just moved them onto the pre-poured slabs. But they look just like any other home. We do have lots of bills that we have been working on through here. Do you take advantage of the MIH program at all, or have you looked at that?
Not yet.
Okay, so I made a motion to fund that this year in appropriations to help out with affordable housing. We also changed some of the codes in here so that they all don't have to be built to ADA specs, just some of them, because that gets expensive to do. And then we also, like on fourplexes, we made it so you didn't have to have sprinkler system as long as you have fire separation. Right. And so those are things that are moving through. We have a Senate bill coming. I don't know if it's going to come to Commerce or it's going to go to banking. But it changes some of the local codes and regulations and tries to streamline the approval process. We passed a bill last year that did just that. I'm not sure if it's in effect yet or if it's working, but once you have a neighborhood and you go to apply for, you know, what's it called? I don't know. Well,
conditional zoning or for ADUs?
Had a Biden moment, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that should be streamlined. And is that working for you yet, or you?
Not quite yet. I know that there's legislation separately that just passed either the House or the Senate. I think the Senate on auxiliary dwelling units, for example, and those are a very important part of the solution here as well. In the issue, to me, it's about aging in place. And we will build auxiliary dwelling units. These are 400 or 500 square foot, one-bedroom units. We can build them for $25,000. And then you've got to get them on a foundation and install them, okay? So you've got a house for your aging-in parent for $50,000, including all the infrastructure to get the utilities hooked up, versus the average stay in Kansas for an aged parent in senior living and in nursing care is 4 years, $400,000, $100,000 a year. Versus an ADU, and you know, people come in and they'll make up a million reasons why, I'm not sure I like that, I don't like that. Opposition for everything, right? That's the world we live in. But when we're talking about being able to keep your parents at your house, and if we can remove the barriers and make it easier to do it and it doesn't mean you do it without regulation. You just stipulate in the regulations what's going to be required. And if you meet those requirements, then you get your permit. It's much harder to do that today. You got to go through conditional use. You got to notify 300 neighbors. They have to come to the hearings. Even though there's a track record, at least in Wichita, where on every conditional use hearing, not one person has opposed. Yet we still have this bureaucracy. So we need to work on things like that.
All right, unfortunately, our time has come to a close. This is all very exciting, and I'll get down there for sure. I'm in Johnson County also, but I'll make it a point to get down there. I
Thank you for
enjoy
your time
getting down there.
today.
So thanks for everything. And we are adjourned.